The Bill Veeck Show.
And now that outspoken friend of the fans, Bill Veeck. Bill, do you think the changes made in Washington will help the Redskins?
Well, it's very difficult to hurt them compared to last year. As a matter of fact, I have a feeling that before the season is half over, Edward Bennett Williams better go down and make another speech, because he mesmerized them last year, and I think they're going to need a little mesmerizing this year. Of course, Otto Graham is... It's a wonderful, delightful thing to find a coach who doesn't moan that he is going to be in real trouble. To find that he's honest, he just says, I don't have the personnel, and it's quite true. Sonny Jurgensen is a fine passer. But, you know, even Graham himself at his best couldn't pass successfully with this club. When the Brownless Browns, and that's putting the Browns down quite a way without either Paul or Jim, the Brownless Browns beat them 38-14 in their opening debut. It wasn't really that the defense was so bad, it was just it was non-existent. Sam Huff can't make all the tackles in the world. And a pretty good fella, Sam. Actually, a fine defense back, but he needs some help. Their pass defense is weak. The club doesn't have any running backs, really, to speak of. It's a bad ball club. But as I started to say, Otto Graham is refreshing because he says, look, we don't have the personnel. We're going to try and improve. We're going to work at it. And I think he'll end up having a pretty good ball club in the field. Not a contender by any stretch of the imagination, but then who expected Washington to contend for anything? They spend all their time in Washington playing politics, not playing football. I think that you'll find that in the next year or so, if they stay with Graham long enough, and Ed Williams works at it hard enough, as he will, he's quite a fellow, remarkably fine man, and happens to be a friend of mine, which automatically makes him a fine man. I think you'll find that he is determined to win, and that with their draft choices, get him first each year as they will, if they don't trade too many of them away, because they're always going to be last, that the Redskins are going to be a much improved ball club. But it doesn't really matter. They put on a great show. It's great fun to watch, and they've sold all their tickets. What more can one ask for? Particularly in Washington, when you can't sell anything. I do think there is one addition we should make, and that is we should all ask Mr. Johnson to put his poverty program into effect with the Redskins. They need help more than anyone I know.
Can you be specific, Bill? What players would you like to see the Redskins get? Maybe you could pick them from other teams if they get the money, or what college players should they especially be?
Well, I think it's a little early, Bob, to try and determine what college players. Anybody who can tackle and block, can run and catch a ball, and even wants to play, they'll help. It doesn't matter who, just pick a name. They've got to be better.
You're thinking of Sam Huff and 10 newcomers who aren't...
Well, Sam has been one of the great defensive ball players. He's not over the hill. He has another year or so left, but he needs some help, particularly their cornerbacks. Even I can outrun those guys without the leg.
Thank you, Bill. The words and ideas belong to Bill Veeck, and he is solely responsible for them.
How many times have you picked up a newspaper or magazine and seen a prestige ad which featured the line, "Established 1848," or "Doing business in the same location since 1939." The companies are proud to make these claims, which prove they have been built on a firm foundation. Those of you on active duty in the armed forces have an opportunity to do business with an organization which can make a similar claim, the United States Armed Forces Institute. USAFI was built on a firm foundation and has been doing business at the same place since 1942. Thousands of servicemen all over the world are enrolled with USAFI right now. Sign up for a course with USAFI, a well-established firm.
The Bill Veeck Show.
And now that outspoken friend of the fans, Bill Veeck. Bill, do you believe the AFL and NFL merger is in violation of antitrust laws?
Bob, I am not good enough attorney at law to be able to answer that with any degree of accuracy. Interestingly enough, it's going to be answered, I think, in time by the courts. You see, no matter how you look at it, the reasons, avowed reasons, the published reasons for the NFL and the AFL getting together was to reduce their overhead, reduce the cost of players. Now, obviously, this comes at the expense of those graduating seniors who used to be able to tap the till for $350 if they could throw it a little bit, or $250 if they could run a little bit. And suddenly, by going together, these two leagues have reduced the bargaining power of college seniors. That in itself looks to me as if it were somewhat against the law of the land of competition. But there is a more interesting part even than that. A fellow by the name of Nussbaum, Bob Nussbaum in Chicago, had for many years, the three that I know of, been trying to get an AFL franchise for Chicago. He felt that as long as there were two ball clubs playing baseball in Chicago, that there was room for two football teams, as there used to be before the Cardinals moved to St. Louis. So he had made application, and the AFL had kept him on the hook, you know, neither turning him down or agreeing. And then suddenly came the great merger. And a part of the merger, apparently, and this I'm only guessing because I don't really know, but it appears that a part of the merger was that there would be no AFL team in Chicago. This was done primarily to protect the Bears. George Halas didn't necessarily want any competition. He certainly didn't want any competition for his son when George, 20 years from now, dies. And so, as a result, Chicago has only one club. Now, I think that Nussbaum is in pretty sound grounds when he says that Chicago can demonstrate that they can support at least two teams. And I think it is contrary to the best interest of the sports fan in Chicago, a football fan I'm speaking of, not to be able to have an opportunity to go see football. Because the Bears are sold out at Wrigley Field every day. It's a small stadium. And I think that the overflow would fill Comiskey Park. And I'm sure that Arthur Allen would like to have a ball club playing there as tenants. As a matter of fact, he also made application for an AFL franchise, so you know he'd like to have one. And I think that Nussbaum is going to cause a great deal of trouble. Manny Sellers, when Pete Rozelle went down to ask the Sellers Committee, assist him in getting a legislature protecting professional football from antitrust suits, said that, what are you worrying about? There isn't any lawsuit yet. He was just 24 hours premature. Mr. Nussbaum was sitting there poised, ready. The moment the Manny Sellers opened his big mouth, boy, then went Nussbaum into action. And so they've got a $12 million suit. And it is going to cause a great deal more trouble than anyone thinks, I believe. It may even upset the alleged merger.
Thank you, Bill. The words and ideas belong to Bill Veeck, and he is solely responsible for them.
When you sign up for a course or series of courses with the United States Armed Forces Institute, you're getting the same education normally available in civilian schools and colleges. USAFE is under the direct supervision of an office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Education and Manpower, with outstanding civilian educators who work with military leaders in the formulation of plans for USAFE. A civilian agency evaluates and makes academic credit recommendations for USAFE courses. This aids schools and colleges in granting credit for educational work done with USAFE. As a result of this cooperation, USAFE courses are based on those available from civilian institutions as well as the needs of the armed forces. So, increase your power through knowledge with USAFE.
And now that outspoken friend of the fans, Bill Veeck. Bill, do you think that television will continue to exercise more and more influence on professional sports?
Well, actually, Bob, it's hard to conceive of 'em exercising much more, because in reality, all professional sports today, that is, all professional sports on the top level, they're controlled primarily by television. An example, the opening football game of the NFL was between Baltimore and Green Bay. Now, by sheer coincidence, the game happened to be scheduled and was played in direct competition to the Miss America pageant. The reason is very simple. Miss America pageant had, in the year previous, had the highest ratings. So they put their best show opposite them to try and cut down the ratings. Not because more people could get to Milwaukee to see the ball game, because they had the place sold out anyhow, but because this was a battle, a struggle for ratings and football, and the game itself became incidental to the two networks' competition. Let me give you another example. The commissioner of baseball made a couple of very profound statements when he announced the World Series scheduling. He said that because to make it easier for the fans and customers and everyone involved, they were going to have an open day if the series were played in Baltimore and Pittsburgh between the two games. Now, obviously, you can walk from Baltimore to Pittsburgh if you have to, or vice versa. What he neglected to mention is that if the series ran 4 straight, playing on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, there would be no Sunday audience, no Sunday game. This he just happened to overlook. Or when he said, don't forget the wind in San Francisco, we're going to start the games at 12 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock. By sheer coincidence, he forgot to mention also that with a 3-hour difference in time, if a ball game ran over more than 2 hours in the East, it was running into prime time. And so this is a protection not for baseball, not for the baseball fan, but for television networks. The timeouts that you find suddenly are called by the referee during the football game for no understandable reason are quite obviously so that the sponsors can get into commercials. Now, don't misunderstand me. I think this is all basically sound. They pay a lot of money, they're entitled to get their show. But the thing that I can't understand is why are they so hypocritical as to think that all of us as sports fans are complete stupid dummies. Why not say, I'm trying to make a buck? At $70,000 a minute for a commercial on a football game, the sponsor's entitled to his timeout. But why not just say, here we have a timeout so that we can get in our pitch, so that we can afford to bring the games to you so you can enjoy them for free. More and more, you'll find that television is not only establishing rules for playing the game, it's even handling personnel, as evidenced by the wrestling match to sign ball players before the alleged merger of the AFL and NFL. They were all babysitting. Who was picking up the tabs? The networks. Why? Because athletics are the one ready-made audience that you can get, and they're taking advantage of it. I see nothing wrong. I do see something wrong with trying to fool us into thinking they're doing us a favor when what they're really doing is trying to make a buck. And boy, if trying to make a buck goes out of style, I hope I go with it.
Thank you, Bill. The words and ideas belong to Bill Veeck, and he is solely responsible for them.
They say that opportunity knocks but once. Perhaps, under certain circumstances, but not where your education is concerned. For you men and women on active duty with the United States Armed Forces have the opportunity to continue your education while serving your country. The United States Armed Forces Institute has been knocking on the door of servicemen for over 20 years. In that time, USAFI has proved conclusively that service personnel who use their off-duty time constructively are more proficient in their military jobs. Ask your education officer about a USAFI course.
The Bill Veeck Show.
And now that outspoken friend of the fans, Bill Veeck. Bill, do you think the spitball might raise its moist head and...
Two fellows who are accused most openly of throwing the spitball are Phil Regan of the Dodgers, their fine relief pitcher by way of Detroit, and Gaylord Perry. Too bad he couldn't have had Ravenel as a middle name. Gaylord Perry of San Francisco. It's an interesting thing about the spitball. Whether they throw it or not really becomes, in part, immaterial, because everybody is sure that they do throw it and are going to throw it, and so the hitter is continuously ill at ease at the plate. Every spitball pitcher, every fellow who loads up, and there are a lot of them that are accused of it, in American League, Pete Ramos, Whitey Ford, Hal Reniff, Wyatt, Pena, even Dave Wickersham, and of course, the ancient and venerable Lou Burdett, all take advantage of the fact that they go through all the motions and it looks like they're trying to sneak a little saliva onto the ball here and there, and even if they don't, it's just about as effective as if they had. Now, there's a great argument, of course, as to whether or not it should be made legal. Most experts will contend that 40% of the pitchers in the major leagues today throw it at one time or another. Normally, they throw it when they're in a real jam. And of course, because it is illegal, they can't load the ball so much that it is as obvious as it used to be. I can remember when Burley Grimes threw a spitter and people in the first rows of either side were liable to get a spray. And they'd hit that ball into the outfield and it was still wet and still slippery and you had more bad throws and it was interesting. Now, because it has to be done so surreptitiously, you don't get enough saliva on the ball to make it as obvious. And umpires, of course, are very hesitant to call it, mainly because I guess they don't want to admit that many are throwing it, and mainly because they might have to call off every other pitch as illegal. But in any event, we were talking for a minute about legalizing it. Each year this comes up, and I think probably it is better to legalize it if there was some way in which you could control the amount. Maybe you should go back to using the slippery elm in judiciously, but when the ball gets to be soaking wet, you know, I really don't think this is a part of the game. And yet, you know, as long as a pitcher knows that he can get a hitter out with any particular pitch, he's going to use it. I don't care whether it's illegal, immoral, fattening, or what. He's going to use it, because this is his only defense against a good hitter. So rather than have him keep throwing them in the World Series or everywhere else, I think maybe they might as well legalize them and let everybody else throw them, and then they'll find, if a guy may come along who'll find that, gee, what a wonderful invention. I'm going to throw a dry pitch.
Thank you, Bill. The words and ideas belong to Bill Veeck, and he is solely responsible for them.
Have you ever sat in the club listening to someone hold the center of attention? No doubt you've said to yourself, how does he do it? He's no smarter than I am. And you may be right. But he does have the power to command your attention. And this power may come from a thorough knowledge of the subject in discussion. This power through knowledge is available to you. The United States Armed Forces Institute provides opportunities for military personnel to continue their education while on active duty with the armed forces. USAFI courses are almost limitless. Why, there are over 200 courses in high school, college, and technical subjects alone. For a small initial fee, you may enroll in your first USAFI course. From then on, you can continue to take other USAFI courses at no further cost, as long as your progress is satisfactory. Take advantage of this opportunity. Develop your own power through knowledge with a USAFI course. The next time there's a big discussion at the club, you may hold the center of attention.
America.
And now that outspoken friend of the fans, Bill Veeck. Tell me, Bill, is George Blanda going to go on forever?
No, I'm afraid, Robert, he's about reached the end of the road. And I don't know who will be sorrier, whether it'll be the opposition or his own team. That sounds like a bum rap. It isn't meant to be, but in 1965, pitching for the Houston Oilers, he set a nice record of 30 interceptions. Completion record, I think, was 42.1, which isn't a very good result for a season. The year before, of course, Blanda had a great year. Maybe this year he'll come back again. His club played against the New York Jets, and I think probably it illustrated that youth, to some extent, will be served the way Namath threw. It'll be served particularly if you have as good an arm as Namath, which is one of the best I've ever seen. Because Namath had a phenomenal day. He completed for 5 touchdowns and so on. But actually, you'll find that the fine quarterbacks are veterans. I think maybe because they not only know more about the game and about calling it, but they pick up poise and confidence and know-how that can't be really replaced by youth. You take a fellow like Unitas, who just set a record for all-time scoring touchdown passes, and he and Bart Starr, for instance, are in their 30s, and they look like they will continue to get better, actually, as long as they can still walk out there. The legs go before the arm, and the legs and arms go before the head, because it takes, I think, in the tough spots, experience. I think all the ball players in the club have more confidence in a veteran who has been through all sorts of jams, a fellow that they know can make 2 minutes last for 25, a fellow who isn't going to panic, is going to not throw the ball away, is going to eat it rather than give up the ball in a jam. And that's just why you like to have that experienced quarterback. On the other hand, there does come a time, as to all athletes, when they just run out of gas. And I'm afraid that Mr. Blanda is on the last of a long and illustrious career. Maybe not. Maybe he'll pick up a bottle of Ponce de Leon's water somewhere along the line and get going. But I rather doubt it. I think we've seen the end of him, and I'm sorry to see him go.
Another one we were sorry to see go a few years ago was Y.A. Tittle.
Oh, yes. Well, actually, that was the record. He held a record that Unitas broke. And Tittle was great fun. And he just finally, his legs gave out. He'd just gotten battered around too much. And of course, there's a tremendous mental pressure on a T quarterback. Not only those behemoths charging you, you have your life on the line on every play, but also because of the constant pressure to make the right call, to check off at that line. It's a tough racket.
Thank you, Bill. The words and ideas belong to Bill Veeck, and he is solely responsible for them.
In the early days of World War II, an organization was born. An organization which offered benefits to all members of the United States Armed Forces. It was formally opened in April 1942 at Madison, Wisconsin, and called the Army Institute. Its mission was to provide educational opportunities for millions of American youths entering the armed forces. The response from servicemen and women was immediate and enthusiastic. Later that year, the facilities were made available to the Navy, and in February 1943, the name was changed to United States Armed Forces Institute. This was the first USAFI. Today, there is a bigger, improved USAFI with 5 branches in various areas of the world. But the mission is still the same. The #1 client is still the United States serviceman, receiving an opportunity to develop power through knowledge with USAFI.